But one that I am much more enthusiastic about, and still would only say I'm open-minded about rather than affirming, is the fine-tuning argument. That's my not area of expertise, because I'm not an expert yet, but that's my area of study. And I cannot help but ask you what you think of the fine-tuning argument. You've been a proponent of one of the main objections to the argument, I guess. And I'm wondering what your current thoughts are about cosmic fine-tuning.
Well, I haven't thought much about it since I wrote the stuff I have written. I don't find it very plausible. Um, uh, the fine-tuning argument is a bit of a misnomer because, as you know, there are many versions. So, to be sensible, we really have to um, talk about particular versions. All right.
Mm.
Um, but I don't know any versions which comport with um, standard views of probability theory.
Yes, so this is the normalizability objection?
No,
No.
well, it depends. It look, I mean, again, we've got to look at particular versions, um, but you're talking about how you handle inverse probabilities, how you determine the probability over infinite space. You've got to talk about how you handle zero probability in probability theory. Um, these are tough questions, all
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and at least most of the versions of fine-tuning argument that I know make some very simplistic assumptions about this.
Let me give you the Philip Goff line of response, and I'll spell out the objection in a little more detail just for listeners, and then hear what you think. So the issue is that the claim's often made that given single universe naturalism, given the view that there's just one universe and the natural world is all there is, we should say that the probability of the constants of physics falling within the life permitting range of values, those values that allow for the evolution of life, that probability is extremely small. And why? Well, it's because the range of life permitting values is just minuscule compared to the total possible range of values that these constants could have assumed. Now, the problem is that it looks like there are no bounds upon the range of possible values, that for some of these constants or initial conditions, they could have assumed an infinite range of possible values. And it doesn't take too much thinking to realize that you get paradoxes and problems that arise when you try to talk about a meaningful probability within an infinite space of possibilities. So that is a rough statement of the normalizability objection, that there are just no meaningful probability assignments we can make in this
Okay.
infinite comparison range. So far, is that basically right?
Well, I mean, there's certainly an issue there. Yeah. I mean, the point is that since um, these constants could take any one of an infinite number of values because they're real numbers, um, then the probability of them taking any uh, range of those values with finite measure is zero. So, I mean, uh, just consider um, all those probability values, some of which include conscious life and some don't. The probability of that's zero as well. So, I mean, yeah, uh, you can capture that under the rubric of how on earth you talk sensibly about a bunch of probabilities, compare a bunch of probabilities which are all zero.
Right. Right. Well, so Philip Goff's response, which I think is right, is that we can just take as background some large but finite comparison range around the life permitting range. We just say something like, what is the probability given naturalism that life permitting constants values would come up given that the value falls within this large but finite comparison range?
Mm-hmm.
And if we do that, we don't have an infinite comparison range. We have a finite range. And so it's all perfectly meaningful to ascribe probabilities in that context.
Yeah.
Is there something illegitimate about doing that?
Well, what's the good of an argument that starts with a false assumption,
But
namely that you're dealing with a finite system.
well, it's not a false assumption. It's just saying what is the probability that this constant, say the gravitational constant, would fall within the life permitting range, given as taking as background information that it falls within this large but other finite range, which is true. It does.
But it's not a light, even if you're in the light cone, it's not finite because it can be any real number.
Okay. You're right. The real number concern, we can distinguish between the one version of the infinite comparison range concern, which is that it could take any value from 0 to infinity, so to speak. Even if that were finite, you could then still press the real number concern. Do you see what I mean? There are two different kinds of infinite comparison objections you can make here. You could say that the values...
I think that's right. I mean, the probabilistic considerations are very sensitive to the exact formulation of the fine-tuning argument, right? So I was giving you one very obvious way of thinking about some problems according to some versions, right? Now, I don't think what you just said helps that. But maybe there are other versions of fine-tuning which have a different approach to probability theory. I mean, I don't know the area terribly well. But as I said, I mean, all the versions of the argument I know don't seem to work very well with standard theories of probability. No. I can't rule out that there are theories I don't know that get around this. Maybe there are. I'd like to see them.
But doesn't the pressing the real value concern threaten a reductio ad absurdum of just about any probabilistic inference we make in everyday life? Joe Schmidt gave me this example of, imagine the leaves fall outside. You go outside and you discover a message written in the leaves saying, "Dad was here," or something. Well, if space is continuous, then there are real valued many arrangements of the leaves you could make, both some of which make sense, some of which don't. And so you couldn't ascribe a probability, if this concern is insoluble, to that message happening given chance. But of course you can. And we can still rule out there being a chance explanation for the leaves falling in that position.
In that context, it seems to me that you can probably use something like a frequentialist theory of probability. And the context you're dealing with is one where the domain is finite. For example, what's happened every day for the last, as long as you like, as long as there have been humans, we know that this hasn't happened. So the probability of this is very low in frequentialist considerations.
Okay. I'll have to think about that. Fair. It gets into then the question of how to relate frequentist interpretations of probability with epistemic probability, and whether or not we need that frequency data in that case to rule out the random chance hypothesis about that message, I guess.
Yeah. No, I mean, the sort of notion of probability you're dealing with and its properties is crucial. And as you sort of indicated, people normally distinguish between objective and subjective notions of probability theory. And that seems like a very good distinction. And then there's a question of how you understand each of those notions and the relationship between them. And those are tough issues in the philosophy of probability theory, as you probably know.
Well, it is tough.